The base was unusually quiet that morning. The sky above Joint Base Andrews was clear, with not a cloud in sight. Flags fluttered lazily in the mild breeze, and the rumble of jet engines echoed in the distance, as always. Inside the barracks lounge, Lieutenant Ava Morgan stirred a paper cup of stale coffee, letting her shoulders finally relax for the first time in weeks. She wasn't on the roster today. No missions, no calls, no endless mechanical puzzles waiting to be solved. After 14 straight days of back-to-back work orders, she had earned a day off. The only plan she had was to finish the mystery novel tucked under her arm, and maybe, just maybe, sneak in a nap in her bunk. She didn't expect anyone to even notice her today, but while Ava sat quietly in the far corner of the lounge, just across the tarmac, something much louder was brewing. A classified transport flight, one of the most sensitive missions scheduled that month, was preparing for takeoff. General Thorne himself was aboard. Known for his rigidity, zero tolerance for delay, and legendary command of high-priority missions, his presence alone sent the entire operations team into a synchronized rhythm of checklists and double checks. Everyone knew, when Thorne was on the move, nothing could go wrong. Except this time, something did. The aircraft was minutes from clearance when the alert chimed inside the cockpit. Red, flashing, navigation system failure. Critical. The co-pilot immediately paged ground control. We've lost nav, requesting immediate tech response. A swarm of engineers surrounded the plane within minutes. Tools clanked, laptops opened, and wires were exposed, yet nothing worked. They rebooted the system. Still red. Checked the software. Diagnostics. Still dead. Captain Ruiz, head of the tech unit on shift, wiped sweat from his brow as he stared at the error logs. "We've never seen this sequence before," he muttered. Beside him, one of the younger techs said under his breath, "Morgan could figure this out in her sleep." Ruiz glanced at him, then back at the open console. "Yeah, well, she's not here. She's off today." But the murmurs didn't stop. "She found that Cum's glitch in under 5 minutes last week. Remember the fuel gauge calibration she fixed? Saved a whole convoy. She just knows these systems." Within the aircraft, General Thorne sat expressionless in his seat. He didn't like delays. Every second on the tarmac felt like failure. He finally stepped off the plane, boots landing heavily on the metal ramp. He walked up to the gathering of techs, each one quickly straightening. "What's the problem?" he asked sharply. Ruiz responded, voice tight. "Sir, we've identified a critical navigation fault. Team's working on it, but we're not making progress yet. Estimated delay is—" "I don't care about estimates," the general cut in. "Who here can fix it?" Silence. Then, from the back, someone mumbled, "Lieutenant Ava Morgan, sir. She's not on shift, but she's the best we've got." Thorne paused, narrowing his eyes. "She's not assigned today?" "No, sir." "She's off." He glanced at his watch. Then, with complete calm, turned to his aide. "Delay takeoff. Find her. Bring her here. I'll wait." Everyone froze. The General Thorne was delaying a mission? The aide blinked. "Sir, we'll send someone immediately." Within 30 seconds, a young lieutenant took off running, cutting through the airstrip and hangars like his life depended on it. He reached the lounge, eyes darting around until he spotted Ava sitting cross-legged in the corner, earbuds in, book open, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding. "Lieutenant Morgan," he called out, breathless. Ava looked up, startled. "Yes?" "General Thorne has grounded a classified flight. He's ordered you on site. Immediate request." She blinked. "Wait, what?" "No time to explain. You've been requested by—" "Name." "The navigation system's down, and no one can fix it." Ava stood up slowly, heart suddenly pounding. I'm not even in uniform. Doesn't matter. He said no. Without another word, she grabbed her tool pouch, clipped it to her belt, and ran. By the time she reached the plane, nearly 20 personnel were gathered around it, most staring at the blinking red screen like it was mocking them. The moment she appeared, heads turned. "Lieutenant Morgan," General Thorne said as she approached, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Can you fix it?" "I can try, sir." "No, don't try, fix it." She nodded once, stepped into the cockpit, and was instantly in her element. She moved past the crew, kneeling beside the console, scanning the interface. Her hands went straight to the wiring panels, checking voltages, reading subcodes, pulling logs that hadn't even occurred to the others to check. She wasn't rushing. She was precise. Focused. Outside, the crew stood silent. No chatter. Just tension. 5 minutes. 10. Then, from inside the cockpit, a soft beep. Ava stood up, looked toward the window, and spoke calmly. "Navigation systems are back online." A sigh of relief swept the crowd. General Thorne didn't smile. He just stared at her for a long moment, then slowly raised his hand in salute. A general saluting a lieutenant. A moment no one on that runway would forget. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the flags on base as Ava stepped back from the aircraft, brushing grease off her hands. The navigation screen inside the cockpit now glowed a steady green. Functioning, stable, airworthy. She didn't look around for applause. She didn't expect any. Fixing things was her job. What she didn't know was that she'd just rewritten her story in the minds of everyone standing on that tarmac. Inside the plane, the co-pilot gave a thumbs up. System checks green across the board. She nailed it. Outside, General Thorne remained still for a moment, then walked to Ava. He stared at her with eyes sharp as steel, then, with deliberate motion, raised his hand and saluted. A stunned silence fell. Ava blinked. Her own hand instinctively rose to return the gesture, her pulse pounding in her ears. A general never saluted first. Not to a junior officer. Not unless it meant something. Without another word, Thorne turned back toward the plane, climbed aboard, and ordered immediate takeoff. The engines fired up. The mission was back on. But the base wasn't the same. As the aircraft lifted off, whispers began to swirl like wildfire in the hangars, lounges, and mess halls. "You heard what happened?" The general waited for her. Delayed a top clearance. Flight ordered her by name. She wasn't even scheduled. She fixed it in minutes. By the time Ava walked back toward the hangar, the air around her felt different. Where once she had passed unnoticed, now heads turned. Salutes came faster. A few officers nodded with respect. A couple even moved aside to let her pass a courtesy, rarely given to lieutenants by majors. She returned to the maintenance bay like she always did, quiet, methodical, hands-on. She never needed recognition. A sound of humming systems and the soft whir of spinning diagnostics were reward enough, but recognition, whether she liked it or not, had come. Ava's mentor, Chief Master Sergeant Doyle, leaned against a workbench, watching her as she returned her tools. "You broke the rules today," he said with a half-smile. "I didn't ask to be called in," Ava replied, shaking her head. "No, but you came. And you didn't freeze." She looked up, her voice quieter. The system was failing. No one else was fixing it. The flight couldn't wait. That's why they called you. A long pause. "You know," Doyle added, "I've seen 100 techs pass through here. Smart ones, loud ones, lazy ones. But you solve things others don't even see." Ava nodded slowly. "I've never cared about credit. I just want the plane safe." He nodded. "But sometimes, Lieutenant, when you're the only one who can fix something, The world has no choice but to notice. Across the base, General Thorne sat in silence aboard the now airborne aircraft. He stared out the window, but his mind was still on the girl with the rolled-up sleeves and the calm hands. Colonel Becker, his aide, finally broke the silence. "Sir, if I may ask, why did you delay takeoff for her?" Thorne didn't look away from the window. "I've seen a lot of technicians in my career," he said. "Most know what the manual says. A few understand what the system needs. But Morgan? She listens to the machine." Becker nodded respectfully. "There was a time," Thorne continued, "when a tech like that would have been promoted in a heartbeat. Now, buried under politics, noise, the loudest voices, not the sharpest minds. I'm tired of that." He finally turned back. "Get her name on my next mission prep list. Every mission. I want her overseeing navigation diagnostics from now on." "Understood, sir." Meanwhile, back at the base, Ava was trying to disappear. She returned to her bunk, half hoping the buzz would die down. But at DID and single quotes T. Within hours, her direct line received a call from Command HQ, not an automated notice. A real voice. "Lieutenant Morgan, this is Colonel Stiles. The General spoke very highly of your performance today. You'll be receiving temporary reassignment as Flight Readiness Lead for all East Corridor missions." Ava sat still for a beat. "Sir?" It's not a request, Lieutenant. You're being promoted into visibility. Effective immediately. Report to briefing at 0600 tomorrow." Click. She sat on the edge of her bunk, phone still in hand, staring into space. It didn't feel real. That evening, back in the lounge where she'd started the day, Ava sat alone again, nursing a fresher cup of coffee. Her novel was closed on the table beside her, forgotten. Her thoughts kept replaying the events over and over. The run, the eyes on her, the silence in the cockpit, the beep, the salute. Across the room, two young airmen whispered excitedly. One of them looked her way. "That's her," he said. The other nodded. "Yeah, the one the General waited for." Ava smiled softly, then stood and quietly walked out, unnoticed this time by choice. But the chase had already begun, not for her to find greatness, but for the system to finally catch up with her. The next morning, the base looked unchanged from the outside. Same sky, same drills, same rumble of jets overhead. But for Ava Morgan, everything felt different. She wasn't just a name lost in the background anymore. By 0600, she stood inside the primary mission prep hangar, now designated Flight Readiness Lead. Her new assignment had been quietly posted on the command board. No announcement, no ceremony, but the ripple it caused was undeniable. Officers who once barely noticed her nodded in acknowledgement. Junior airmen watched her with something between curiosity and awe. Ava tried to ignore the stares. She focused on her checklist, eyes sharp, fingers flying across the tablet. She still preferred machines to people. "Lieutenant Morgan." She looked up. Colonel Becker, General Thorne's aide, stood beside her, clipboard in hand. "General wants your eyes on all aircraft assigned to Corridor 7 this week," he said. "No exceptions." Ava blinked. "Even the Eaglebirds?" "Especially the Eaglebirds." The Eaglebird Squadron flew special intel runs, covert, fast, and sensitive. Few technicians were allowed near them. "Sir, I don't have clearance. You do now." General signed it personally. He handed her the signed pass. The ink was still fresh. Ava swallowed hard and nodded. Later that afternoon, she stood beside the sleek frame of an Eaglebird jet, her hands brushing its metallic skin like it was a living thing. She connected her tools and diagnostic kit, humming softly, eyes scanning for any glitch, miscalibration, or whisper of malfunction. Then she heard the voice behind her. You really fixed that nav system yesterday? She turned. It was Lieutenant Kirk, one of the base's senior flight engineers. Known for his sarcasm and stubborn pride, he folded his arms as he approached. I did, Ava replied calmly. 5 other guys couldn't do it. You walk in, plug a few wires, and boom, green lights. Ava didn't respond right away. She kept checking her readings, then finally said, I don't guess when I work. I listen. Systems talk. You just have to know how they speak. Kirk scoffed, but his face gave away a trace of unease. He didn't like being shown up, especially by someone younger, quieter, and up until now, invisible. As he walked away, Ava returned her focus to the aircraft. She didn't care about rivalries or bruised egos. What mattered was that the jet flew clean, and the mission didn't fail because someone missed a buried fault line. That evening, she was called to a confidential briefing room on the upper level somewhere she had never been invited before. General Thorne sat at the head of a small table, flanked by 2 other high-ranking officers. Ava stood silently at attention until the general gestured for her to sit. He got right to the point. We're facing a new level of threat in the Eastern Corridor, Thorne said. We've had 2 near-mission failures in the past month both, due to equipment issues that were passed over during standard checks. He looked her directly in the eye. That ends now. Ava nodded, absorbing every word. You'll have full oversight of preflight tech integrity for every outbound operation in that sector. If something doesn't feel right to you, you ground it. I don't care what rank is on board. One of the officers raised a skeptical eyebrow. Sir, she's still just a lieutenant. Lieutenant Morgan, Thorne interrupted, saved a multi-million-dollar aircraft, a time-sensitive mission, and potentially prevented a chain of international incidents, all while off duty. So, unless you can do better, I suggest you respect her stripes. Silence filled the room. Ava sat motionless, heart pounding. Thorne leaned back. You've proven what I suspected, Lieutenant. You don't just follow checklists, you understand the machines. Most people miss what's right in front of them. You see behind the code. She finally spoke, voice low but clear. I don't want awards, sir. Just the chance to do the work right. Good, Thorne said with a faint smirk. Because the next mission depends on it. Back in her quarters that night, Ava stared at the stack of mission specs she'd been handed. Pages and pages of encrypted schematics, flight patterns, and classified configurations. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. For years, she had worked in the shadows, fixing what others ignored. Now, the spotlight was on her not for vanity, but because when the pressure was highest, she had stepped into the fire and never flinched. Her phone buzzed. A message from her old mentor, Chief Doyle. Heard you got handed the whole damn corridor. Make us proud. She smiled. She thought back to the cockpit from the day before. The soft hum of electronics, the red flashing light, the steady calm. In her chest, as others panicked. That was her world. That was where she belonged. And now, everyone finally knew it. Across the base, changes were already taking root. Tech crews requested her notes. Young airmen asked to shadow her shifts. Command officers began including her in briefings she'd never been invited to before. But Ava didn't bask in it. She didn't brag. She showed up early, stayed late, and made sure every bolt, circuit, and data stream worked the way it was supposed to. And every now and then, when someone asked how she did it, how she always found what no one else could, she'd simply smile and say, I listen to what others overlook. And she did. That's why the mission flew. 2 days after the mission Ava had saved, the base still buzzed with talk of her. The legend was growing, no exaggeration needed. A general had delayed takeoff, called for a low-ranking tech who wasn't even on shift, and saluted her in front. of the entire flight crew. No one could remember anything like it. In an institution built on rigid hierarchy, the gesture meant something more than honor. It meant recognition. But Ava? She kept her head down. She was in Hangar 4 before sunrise, scanning a diagnostic report on the newly arrived stealth craft, her mind buried in voltages and signal flows. She hadn't told her parents, hadn't posted on social media. It wasn't her way. Still, things had changed. Staff saluted her faster. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. And then there were the invitations, briefings, roundtables, command reviews, all requesting her input. Not because of protocol, but because they finally realized she was the one who could see what others missed. That morning, while reviewing a faulty stabilizer module, she was called to Central Command again. Another mission, another error, and another silence she'd be expected to break. When she arrived, a colonel escorted her straight to the briefing room. The officers inside turned as she entered, most of them older, higher-ranking, and visibly skeptical. Until General Thorne walked in behind her. "She's not here to observe," he said, stepping forward. "She's leading the review." A few exchanged confused glances. One even began to protest, but Thorne cut him off without a glance. If she had been in this room last week, that aircraft wouldn't have nearly crash-landed outside Tehran. The room went quiet. Ava, still stunned by the statement, stepped toward the terminal. She loaded the flight data, drew up the error logs, and began explaining calmly, clearly, and without hesitation, how a cascade failure had gone unnoticed. Through 3 layers of checks, she didn't accuse. She didn't gloat. She educated. And when she finished, no one said a word. Even the critics took notes. After the briefing, she returned to the hangar to find a small crowd of young recruits waiting. One stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you mind if we watch you work?" Ava looked surprised. "Why?" "Because everyone says you're the reason half of us are still flying." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you'll be doing more than watching." From that day on, Ava became something unexpected, a quiet mentor. She never shouted, never demanded, but she taught with precision and care. She showed recruits how to listen to the hum of a jet engine, how to recognize a system warning before it flashed red, how to feel when something was off, even when the screen said it wasn't. The younger airmen followed her like shadows. They scribbled notes. They asked questions. They stayed after shifts just to keep learning. In a place where obedience was standard and innovation often stifled, Ava's workshop became a rare place of growth. Word eventually reached the Pentagon. "General, Thorne received a direct call from a senior defense official. You've got a lieutenant creating systemic change." "This the same girl you delayed a mission for?" Thorne grunted. "No, that was just the beginning. She's rewriting how we keep these machines alive." The official asked if she was ready for command. Thorne answered without pause. "She's already commanding. You just haven't given her a title yet." That weekend, as Ava was prepping the engine bay of a Falcon X recon jet, she heard heavy boots approaching. She turned to see General Thorne, alone, holding a sealed envelope in one hand. He didn't smile, but his voice held something close to warmth. "Lieutenant." "Sir, I'm not big on speeches, so here it is." He handed her the envelope. She opened it. Inside was a single document. A formal promotion. Temporary command rank pending full review. But more than that, it named her chief technical advisor to the Strategic Flight Integrity Unit. Ava blinked. This can't be right. "It's overdue," Thorne said simply. "You're not just a problem solver anymore. You're a system changer." She felt her throat tighten, but she held firm. "I'm still just a technician." "No," he replied. "You're the standard." Back in the rec room later that night, Ava finally let herself pause. For the first time in months, she sat on the same worn couch, sipped the same vending machine coffee, but now with a weight lifted. One of the young techs she'd been mentoring walked in. He stopped mid-step when he saw her, then came over nervously. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For making me believe someone like me could matter here." Ava smiled softly. "Then make yourself matter. Don't wait for someone to notice. Just show up and fix what's broken." He nodded slowly, inspired, and left. She stared out the window at the hangar lights glowing in the night. So much had changed. But at her core, Ava Morgan was still the same. She didn't chase glory. She didn't need applause. She just wanted things to work, and now, finally, the system was starting to dot, and all because one day, she wasn't even on the roster. And a general delayed takeoff, just to call for her. By now, Ava Morgan's name was everywhere, but her story remained mostly unknown. Officers respected her. Pilots trusted her. Recruits idolized her. Yet few understood how she became the quiet force shaping the base. That changed one evening, during a commander's roundtable, where new protocol revisions were being reviewed. A visiting colonel from another division leaned back in his chair and asked, "Why haven't I heard of this Morgan until now?" General Thorne, seated at the head, didn't hesitate, because we didn't look where we should have. He nodded toward the intel officer seated beside him. "Pull up her file." Ava's record appeared on the projector. Flawless maintenance scores, commendation ribbons, glowing reviews from instructors, and years of being passed over. She had ranked first in her class at tech school, broken 2 records in diagnostics, and identified a systems vulnerability during a training exercise that was later classified for national security. Yet for 4 years, she had been left on routine tasks, ignored during selections, and repeatedly denied promotion. Why? The colonel asked. Thorne's jaw tightened. She didn't fit the mold, didn't talk loud, didn't self-promote, never played the politics game. Another commander added, "We let potential slip through because it wasn't wrapped in ego." The room fell silent. Someone finally said, "And she still stayed?" "She didn't just stay," Thorne replied. "She outperformed all of us. And she never once asked for recognition. That's why she's dangerous in the best possible way." Back on the floor, Ava kept doing what she always did, working, teaching, leading through quiet example. But the shifts were becoming harder. To ignore. New hires were now assigned to her mentorship team automatically. Engineers who had once brushed past her now asked for her input before finalizing tech specs. Even command staff had started reshaping review metrics, putting actual performance above personality. One afternoon, while reviewing a faulty guidance interface on a supply drone, she found a bug that had gone unnoticed across 3 bases. It wasn't major yet, but left unresolved. It could have grounded dozens of aircraft mid-mission. She wrote the fix, submitted a full report, and moved on. 3 days later, that single fix was circulated through an Air Force-wide systems bulletin. It was stamped with her name at the bottom. Diagnostic Protocol Revision, LTA Morgan. Her inbox flooded. Some messages came from tech chiefs she'd never met. Others came from other bases, requesting workshops. A few simply said, "We've been watching. You're changing things." But praise wasn't the only thing rising. So was resistance. Not everyone liked the new order. Inside one operations meeting, a senior technician slammed the binder closed. "Why are we rewriting 20 years of process based on one lieutenant's method?" A supervisor replied, "Because she's already prevented 3 potential mission delays this month alone." "It's not about that," he snapped. "It's about chain of command. If we let one tech bypass the ladder, what example are we setting?" Someone quietly responded, "That merit still matters." The debate didn't end there. Rumors spread some claimed she was Thorne's favorite. Others accused her of stepping over others for credit. Ava heard it all, but she didn't respond. She just kept showing up and kept being right. One evening, Ava received a message from someone unexpected. Her old academy instructor, Commander. Ellis, heard what you've done. Wish I'd spoken up more for you back then. I saw it, but I didn't push it. That's on me. Ava stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't feel like revenge or vindication. It just felt overdue. The next morning, General Thorne called her to a private briefing. When she arrived, he was reviewing flight metrics on a touch panel. Without turning, he spoke. You ever wonder why I knew to call for you that day? Ava blinked. I assumed you overheard the team talking. Thorne turned toward her. Partly. But truth is, I'd read your file the week before. A quiet audit crossed my desk. I remember thinking, how did we miss this woman for 4 years? Ava said nothing. Unsure how to respond, he continued. When that nav system failed and no one had answers, I remembered your name. I took a gamble. A beat of silence passed. I don't gamble twice, Lieutenant. Next time, it'll be your call before the system breaks. He handed her a new badge. Acting Deputy of Flight Integrity Operations. Not temporary. Not honorary. Real title. A real seat at the table. Ava stared at it, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, sir. You earned it. That night, walking through the base after hours, Ava passed the hangar she used to clean alone. She remembered nights when no one stayed late. Times she submitted reports that never got read. Days when she fixed things that others claimed as their own. Now, the lights were still on. Tech teams worked late not because they had to, but because they wanted to do things right. She passed a training room where young cadets reviewed one of her old repair videos. One paused the footage and said, this right here, see how she pauses before changing the input? That's what saved the system. The others nodded. They weren't just learning procedures anymore. They were learning our legacy. The story of Lieutenant Ava Morgan had moved beyond the walls of Joint Base Andrews. What started as a single mission delay had become a wave of reform across air bases. Quietly, methodically, and without asking for attention, Ava had become the face of competence, proof that expertise doesn't always come wrapped in stars and swagger. But while the admiration grew among airmen and junior officers, some behind closed doors weren't so quick to celebrate. Inside a panel room at Air Mobility Command Headquarters, 5 senior officers met to discuss recent changes. Her name came up almost immediately. She's rewriting standard ops, one colonel said, frowning. Without ever being promoted beyond lieutenant. She's doing more than that, another added. She's making us look like we've been asleep at the wheel. General Thorne, seated at the end of the table, said nothing at first. He just let the words bounce off the walls. Then, when they paused for breath, he spoke. You're all focusing on her rank. You should be focusing on your results. Silence. She's saved 6 missions in 2 months, Thorne continued. That's 6 flights that would have cost this country millions or worse. One officer tried to counter. But what kind of precedent does this set? Letting a field tech change top-down procedures? Thorne stood slowly. It sets the right one. A culture where skill matters more than posture. The meeting ended shortly after. Not everyone agreed, but they understood something had shifted. Whether they liked it or not, Ava Morgan had changed the conversation. Back at the base, Ava wasn't thinking about politics. She was buried under the hood of a failing fuel regulation sensor. She'd been working 14 hours straight. Her hands were covered in grime, her voice hoarse from explaining technical breakdowns to 3 separate teams. Still, she didn't complain. She'd never done the job for attention, but that night, She did notice something new. Chief Doyle, her old mentor, watching from the edge of the hangar. She gave a nod. He walked over, arms crossed. You know, I've been through 30 years of operations, he said, and I've never seen anything like this. Ava raised an eyebrow. Like what? You. This. Everyone watching a lieutenant, like she's the chief of staff. I'm not in charge of anyone, she replied. No. But you lead every time you speak. You fix problems no one else wants to touch. And now, even the officers are quoting your procedures. He paused, then lowered his voice. That's power, Ava. Real power. Even if they pretend it's not. Despite rising praise, challenges kept coming. 1 week, an out-of-state flight team refused to follow her updated maintenance protocol. The lead officer, a stubborn captain, claimed it was untested. He insisted his crew knew what they were doing. Ava stayed calm. She didn't argue. She simply ran a shadow diagnostic quietly, on her own time, and found a fault they had. Missed. A small one, but one that could have caused MIDR. Stabilization drift. She submitted it with no comment. The captain was pulled from the mission the next morning. His team reassigned. And Ava? She was called into the general's office again, but not for punishment. Thorne handed her a new directive. You're now authorized to overrule any tech procedure that contradicts your diagnostic authority, regardless of rank. Ava stared at the document. I don't want to overstep, she said. You're not, Thorne replied. You're fixing what others overlook. That's why this base hasn't lost a mission since you started leading. As weeks passed, more stories emerged. One junior airman confessed that Ava's advice had prevented a calibration error that would have cost the base a week of downtime. Another said she'd talked him out of rushing a launch, despite pressure from superiors. And that delay had caught a software timing bug hours later. And late one night, a senior technician, once her loudest critic, found her alone in the hangar. He cleared his throat awkwardly. You were right about that cooling unit. I didn't see it. Would have blamed the system again. She didn't mock him. Didn't lecture. Just offered a wrench. Want to help me replace it? That was Ava. No speeches. No revenge. Just solutions. Eventually, the base commander proposed something radical. A training course modeled after Ava's approach. Operational intuition. Advanced diagnostic thinking. She was asked to design it. At first, she hesitated. Teaching wasn't her comfort zone. But over time, she accepted. She created modules that focused on logic over assumptions, on listening over rushing. She used her real-world failures, not just her successes, as examples. When the first class graduated, they lined up not to take pictures, but to shake her hand. You changed the way we see our job. One cadet told her. You made it matter. Said another. One afternoon, after another long shift, Ava passed a young tech pacing nervously by a drone bay. Something wrong? She asked. He looked startled. I think I made a mistake on a calibration report, but I didn't want to say anything. They'll think I'm careless. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Do you want to be right, or do you want to get it right? He looked down. Get it right. Then go back, fix it, and learn from it. That's what I do every single day. And he did. In the back rooms. Debates continued. But on the ground, where it mattered, Ava Morgan was already winning. Not with force, not with a title, but with truth, consistency, and a rare kind of leadership no policy could deny. And for everyone watching, the lesson became clear. Sometimes the strongest leaders aren't the ones in charge. They're the ones fixing what no one else will touch. The ripple of Ava Morgan's work reached further than she ever imagined. What started as a mission delay turned into a blueprint for reform across several Air Force bases. Officers who had once dismissed her as just a tech were now quoting her methods during national briefings. She wasn't just known on the base anymore. Her name had traveled to Pentagon corridors, to aviation conferences, and to the desks of those who rarely looked past brass and ribbons. But Ava remained grounded literally. Every day she showed up early, checked her tools, and helped her crew troubleshoot aircraft like she always had. Still, she couldn't ignore the changes around her. Her once quiet workbench now had 3 assistants. Junior techs came daily to observe how she worked. A commander from another base asked her to consult on drone flight maintenance. The simulation school requested a virtual version of her training course. All without her applying for anything. One morning, she received a package on her desk. No note, just a polished plaque. Lt. Ava Morgan, the standard others now follow. She didn't know who sent it, but she placed it inside her locker, not on the wall. Her focus remained: keep the machine safe, keep the people safe. That week, General Thorne summoned her. Not for diagnostics, for a classified planning session. Ava, he said, gesturing her to a seat. This is Colonel Reese from Air Force HQ. The colonel extended a hand. You've stirred a lot of discussions, Lieutenant. Ava shook his hand, unsure how to respond. We're establishing a new advisory board, Thorne continued, focused on elevating field innovations to command. Strategy. Your name came up more than once. Ava blinked. You want me to advise ... generals? We want your perspective, Reese clarified. The kind we don't get from officers behind desks. She hesitated. Sir, I don't have command training. I've never even led a platoon. That's exactly why you're the right person. Thorne said, You've led with outcomes, not orders. The next few months were a whirlwind. Ava was flown out twice for classified mission briefings. She sat beside generals, colonels, tech leaders, and she didn't just sit quietly. She asked sharp questions. She pointed out gaps in simulations. She rewrote procedures others hadn't challenged in years. At first, many doubted her. Some called her the general's pet. Some rolled their eyes when she spoke. But then she'd point out a fatal flaw they hadn't noticed. A misaligned torque spec, a miscalculated wind drift in simulation, a blind spot in pilot safety during refueling. And each time, she was right. Back at the base, her absence was felt. But Ava made sure her team didn't fall behind. She mentored a young tech named Grayson, a quick thinker but easily shaken. He had failed twice during system tests, convinced he wasn't cut out for diagnostics. You think I didn't mess up at your age? Ava told him during a late-night walk through Hangar 3. You? I thought you were perfect. She smiled. I once shorted a radar unit by accident and grounded a jet for 2 days. Thought I'd be discharged on the spot. What happened? My chief gave me a second chance, and I never forgot how much that mattered. The next week, Grayson caught an error during a presidential aircraft inspection. A minor pressure valve glitch that no one else had noticed. It earned him a commendation. But he gave credit to Ava. She taught me how to see what others miss, he said, and not be afraid to speak up. More and more techs began following her approach, not because they were told to, but because it worked. Ava's influence became a movement. Not loud, not forced, but undeniable. One night, she received a call. It was Chief Doyle. He sounded distant. I'm retiring, he said. They want to name a bay after me. That's great, Ava said. You deserve it. But I told them to name it after you instead. What? She asked, shocked. You're the one they all talk about now. You're the one who changed how we work, not me. She was silent. You sure? She whispered. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. A week later, in a small ceremony with no press, no headlines, and no podium speeches, Hangar 7 was renamed the Morgan Bay, in honor of technical brilliance and unshakable integrity. Ava stood in the back, arms crossed, her uniform dusty from morning work. She didn't smile for the cameras. There weren't any. But as her team clapped and her name echoed through the base PA system, she felt something deeper than pride. She felt the weight of her journey and the responsibility it carried. Night, she walked alone along the runway, the wind cool against her face. Jets roared above, safe, strong, and soaring. Behind every flight, she knew there were dozens of names like hers, techs in shadows, problem solvers in silence, people who never got headlines. She wasn't there to be famous. She was there to make sure no mission ever failed for lack of listening. She closed her eyes and whispered, "This isn't the end. This is the middle." Because Ava Morgan knew there were still too many people waiting to be called off the bench. And now she had the power to call them forward. 6 months after Hangar 7 was renamed in her honor, Ava Morgan's quiet legacy had grown into something much larger than herself. Air Force maintenance units across the country began implementing her training modules. Her field diagnostics manual, something she never meant for publication, was now an official part of tech school curriculum. New cadets whispered her name with awe, and instructors spoke of the Morgan Standard when reviewing equipment readiness. But Ava didn't chase any of it. Fame still made her uncomfortable. Every day, she arrived before sunrise, still in her oil-stained uniform, still hands-on, still inspecting the underbellies of aircraft most officers never even walked under. What had changed, though, were the people around her. Where once she worked alone, she was now surrounded by young techs hungry to learn. Grayson, now a senior in her division, ran point on radar systems. Mia, a fast-rising electrical specialist, mirrored Ava's attention to detail so precisely that pilots began requesting her by name. The ripple effect was real, and Ava had become the calm center of it all. One evening, after a long shift, she was summoned to the general's office. She expected a debrief or a base update. What she didn't expect was a transfer order. General Thorne handed her a sealed folder, his expression unreadable. She opened it and froze. Assignment: United States Air Force Academy. Role: Head of Advanced Systems Integration and Technical Leadership. Effective: 30 days. She looked up, stunned. "Sir, I'm not an instructor." "No," he said with a faint smile. "You're more than that. I've never taught a classroom." "You've taught hundreds without realizing it." She hesitated. "I belong on the flight line, with the machines." Thorne leaned forward. "You've done more for those machines than anyone in my career. But now it's time to teach the ones who'll care for them after you." A long silence passed between them. She slowly nodded. "I don't want ceremony," she said. "You won't get one. But you will get cadets who think like you. And that, Lieutenant, is how we build something that lasts." On her final day at the base, Ava spent her shift walking through every hangar. Not as a farewell tour. As a last checklist. She spoke with every junior tech she'd mentored. Gave Grayson her original torque wrench. Left her handwritten notes with Mia, filled with diagrams and scribbles no manual had ever included. Then she returned to her locker, the same one she had kept since her first year on base. Inside, everything was gone, except the plaque someone had sent her months ago. LT. Ava Morgan, the standard others now follow. She looked at it for a long time, then tucked it under her arm and walked out. 3 weeks later, she stood in front of 30 wide-eyed cadets at the Air Force Academy. Most of them had read about her. Some of them whispered when she entered. Few were clearly skeptical. She didn't open with a SLIDESHOW or a rank-heavy introduction. She simply held up a broken circuit board. "This grounded a $70 million aircraft," she said. They blinked. It took me 7 minutes to fix it. But it took me 7 years to understand how to fix it. Silence. Then she smiled faintly. I'm here to make sure it doesn't take you that long. From that day forward, her classroom became legendary. No desks, only arts, tools, real cases. She made them crawl under fuselage models. She gave them damaged systems without instructions. She trained them to listen, not just to machines, but to one another. One winter afternoon, a young cadet named Ellis stayed behind after class. He was quiet, sharp, and unsure of himself. He said, "Do you ever feel like you don't belong in the room? Like they let you in by mistake?" Ava looked at him. For a long time. Then she reached into her file drawer and handed him something. It was a worn-out page from her first month as a lieutenant. A maintenance report. Full of red marks. All her mistakes. First time I touched an F-16, I almost fried the Comes array, she said. Thought I'd be sent home. Ellis stared at the paper, then back at her. You weren't? No, she said. Because I stayed and fixed it. Years passed. Ava remained at the academy, but her reach continued to grow. Dozens of her former cadets became mission leads. Some flew jets she once kept in the sky. One, a young woman named Sergeant Ramos, became the first tech crew member to receive a national medal for system integrity under fire. She quoted Ava's manual in her acceptance speech. Another Ellis, now a decorated drone fleet strategist, mailed Ava a handwritten note. It read, "You made me believe I belonged. Now I teach others the same." Ava smiled softly when she read it. She didn't hang the note on the wall. She folded it and tucked it in her uniform pocket. Close to the heart. One evening, walking past the academy hangar, she paused. Cadets were still inside. Wires, lights, laughter. Focused. Ava stood in the shadows for a moment, watching them. She remembered who she was the day the general called her off the roster. The disbelief. The silence. The sprint. She remembered the broken nav system. The salute. And how everything changed after that. But most of all, she remembered the moment she realized she didn't need to fly to be part of the mission. She was the mission. And now, S.O. were. They. The story of Ava Morgan didn't end in the cockpit. It lived on in every tech who followed her footsteps. Every problem solver who chose precision over pride. Every voice who spoke up when something felt off. Not everyone becomes a legend. Some just become a reason others rise. Ava Morgan? She became both. The end.